I am Marwan Cameron, and this is The Conduit. All right, y'all, this is the second podcast of today, the second of probably three. I may have four or five tomorrow. It is going to be uh, a packed, jam packed week. Election is tomorrow, so if you haven't voted, please get out and vote. That is important for you to do. Lots of great stuff going on, but you know how we do on Mondays. Mondays is KCR with Matt Garrett and Bremerton Housing Authority with Jill or Lori, and we have Lori today with us, and it's going to be really, you know, it's going to be good because our conversation last week was really good and powerful. And now that we are into November 1st and the bridge program is over, we are going to slowly, well, I'm saying optimistically, slowly start to see things maybe get even more challenging as folks try to scramble to find affordable housing. So, that's my optimism, but I have more of a pessimistic viewpoint on it. But hopefully, Matt and Lori are here today to kind of share some tips and tricks to help navigate that and make it a little bit easier. As always, give yourself grace, patience, plan ahead, and work with folks. Interdependence is the key, not independence, not codependence. So, why don't we go ahead and let everyone on? Good afternoon, Lori and Matt. How are you today?
I am well, thank you.
Good. How's it going, Marwan? Thanks for having us.
Well, like I was saying in an earlier podcast, I'm always blessed and highly favored, but I'm having a case of the Mondays. Now, Monday is my favorite day, but I'm just having a day. Sometimes it's just like that. You got to ride the wave and got to smile through it. So, in my old studio, I used to have a gratitude bowl. It was something that I taught when I was teaching at OC, and so trying to get you to not stay in a funk, right? You can have a situation or someone cut you off in traffic and you're in this bad mood, and that person probably didn't even know they cut you off, right? And they didn't actually mean it if they knew about it, but here you are just angry. You almost killed me. You could have drove me off the road, me and my kid. And you can stay in that space for hours, or maybe even the whole day, and it will really dictate how your day goes. Or you can take power over that and say, you know what, I'm thankful for this. There was no accident. I still got to work, and start to kind of talk about those things and navigate yourself through and out of it. So, I think that's an appropriate segue to our conversation today, because there's going to be a lot of gratitude and, positive thinking that needs to go on as we try to, find housing and just kind of deal with that.
Well, thanks for being here, Marwan. Even though you're having a little bit of rough, I concur. Mondays are always so tough. Feels just like getting hit by a bus a little bit of everything that needs to get done. So I feel that energy, and trying to get out of stinking thinking loops are really tough. They're hard for me as well.
That's so funny you say that. That makes me laugh. So during my master's program, Marty Drummondale was one of my mentor instructors, and she said, no stinking thinking. So that's where I first heard that phrase, and I will never forget her for that. So that's awesome. I haven't heard that in years.
It's not mine. I got that from Richard Rohr. So I got to give Richard Rohr. He's a podcast I listen to. But anyways, yeah. So he says that all the time. And,
yeah, I have not heard that in years. That's awesome. That makes me smile. See, now my day is good now. I'm done for the rest of the day.
That's fantastic. That's
she's
awesome.
This little old lady, and she's really powerful, But yeah, she used to teach that, and because I was going to be a math teacher in the high school level at once upon a time. So, man, I tell you, you never know where life is going to take you.
Well, I originally started teaching math in high school. That was one of my first jobs. Well, second job. I've had a long, winding career to get where I am now. But yeah, 2 years in Biloxi, Mississippi, I taught calculus and remedial algebra.
Wow. Man, yeah. We kind of have a lot of similarities, huh?
Yeah, I know. That's interesting. So, but you taught at the college though, right?
Yeah, I did. So I was going to teach high school math. So when we finished our master's degree, my wife at the time, she started teaching at Bremerton High, and then the Navy called me and was like, you're not going on a honeymoon. You're going to start this job, down with the Navy College. So I went down there, and so it diverged my whole career, So it was just kind of
interesting.
Yeah. So Lori, how are you doing? How was your weekend? How was Halloween?
It was good. I was just gonna say I do not have a math background. If I said I did, I'd be a liar. But yeah, it was good. I got one trick or treater, but
One,
just one. I wanted so many more, but hey, I'll take the one.
you can have all of mine. So, first off, my pumpkins rotted. We carved them like 3 weeks before. I had Rob take it down to the garbage. It was full of water and it was black. I was like, I've never had a moldy pumpkin. Like, what happened this year? So I'm glad my daughter didn't see that.
Hmm.
And then I always turn the lights off. So it's like, yeah, I don't give out candy. Like I'm sitting in my house all quiet, like, no, I'm not here.
Do you normally get a lot of trick or treaters, Laura? Is this a dip, or is this because we never? My house is really tucked away, so we've never gotten a trick or treater once since we've lived at this place. But so do you normally get trick or treaters, Lori?
Well, it's the first Halloween I've had here.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, I was kind of like hoping, hey, maybe there's gonna be a bunch because it's an apartment complex. But
Yeah.
oh well, maybe next. I don't know. Maybe next year. Keep your fingers crossed. I love trick or treaters. Oh, like I'm the candy lady. So
You're the candy lady?
I'm the candy lady. I'll hook you up.
Well, yeah, BHA is open now, right? So I can come down and get something you haven't eaten with chocolate with almonds in it
Exactly.
or Skittles.
Exactly. See what we have.
All right, that's my weakness there. Well, let's get into the show this week. As I was kind of prefacing and Jill shared last week, the bridge program was ending. So this is day one of whatever the new normal is going to be. So no one really knows how this is going to play out. And we kind of worked through that example last week, but it's just too soon to know. So everyone out there listening, understand, please give us all grace, because until we start to see what the patterns are and how things work with landlords and the courts and eviction and everything else, we're just not going to know quite how this thing is going to play out. So, um, we're coming right into, I mean, it was cold last night, it was like what, 36, 35 degrees. Frost was, I sent the county an email because we do transportation during the severe weather shelters. I was like, are they going to open early this year? So just trying to consider that, all these things go together. So it's just those things are swirling in my mind. Um, but what we want to talk about today was kind of looking at some of those housing strategies, if we can get into that. So, and Lori, you said you actually were going to get deep into the weeds of the application. Do you want to, I could turn it over to you. We could talk about that piece first, go right into the application. But you are the SME, you are the subject matter expert. So I defer to you.
Oh well, thank you. Um, okay, so I wanted to quickly touch on the rental application because in my what I'm doing when I'm helping people, this is another stumbling block I see commonly. So the rental application can seem daunting, and I want people to think of it as like a job application because you're going to be asked a lot of the same things. I think the best thing to do is to go online, look for common rental application questions, and get out your answers beforehand. When you go to apply online, it's like at least three quarters online. You're going to get inundated if you're not coming to that prepared. You're going to be like, I don't know. So they usually ask for employment. They usually ask for or income. They usually ask for rental history. They usually ask about criminal background. And so the other thing I wanted to touch on is how to communicate that you have a voucher as your income
Well,
or
Lori,
as a
type
way to pay
that in.
rent.
Let me type that in. So you said they usually ask for employment, and what were the other three?
They usually ask for employment or income, correct? Um, rental history,
Hmm.
um, and if you have a criminal background history, um, and then other items like pets, if you have them, or how many people will be living in the household, things like to that extent.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. And so one thing I wanted to say, especially for people with the Section 8 voucher, is if you are wondering how to tell a landlord or how to broach that subject, when you call them, and I think we went into this a little bit before, Marwan, but when you call them, yeah, don't start off by saying, "Hey, I have a Section 8 voucher. Do you accept it?" Start off by saying, "Hey, my name is this. I saw your ad. I'm really interested. I'd love to, et cetera, et cetera." Show that, let them get to know you. Ask them about applying and ask them if if you could report voucher, how would you want me to do that? Would you want me to use the employment section? Would you want me to put that in the notes? That way, when they get your application, they can see, oh, this person's income or their income would be able to cover their rent. Because we get a lot of people too that are like, oh, I don't make 3 times the rent. There's a whole thing about that too. I can refer you to a really good resource, Washington Law Help, that actually addresses that. Um, but yeah, so if you are interested in a place, get to know their rental application. Make sure you are coming to it with, find dates. Where did you live? How much rent did you pay? What's the address? When did you leave? Um, if you have an employer, who were they? How much did you make? What dates were you employed? Stuff that matter. And then ask the landlord, hey, after you've gotten to know them, how would you want me to report my my Section 8 voucher, which will be what I will use to pay my rent.
I
Yeah.
want to fall back and ask you about how do you get to know the landlord? But before that, one of the things that was mentioned last week is these units. Matt, I think Matt mentioned it. They're going so fast that if
Mhm.
you are trying to, it's like we're applying for a new job and we're trying to remember where we worked, the dates and everything else. By the
Mhm.
time you get that together, that they may have already taken someone. So you have to have that already ready. Is that you concur with that, Lori and Matt?
Bingo. I think that's I personally, when I was applying for jobs, years ago, I filled out a blank job application with all the information that I remembered, and I would take it when I was filling out applications. I would say, "Oh, okay, here I worked here from this date to this date." The reason why that's relevant is because that can be so confusing when you're trying to remember dates. It's just there's so much to remember, especially if you've lived in 3, 4, 5 different places in the past 10 years. That's a lot of stuff to remember. You got, think about the landlord's names, the phone number, like I said, the address, the rental amount, all sorts of questions. Write that all down and be prepared so when you go online, you're not going to be caught off guard.
Matt, will you weigh in here on that piece of it, just to kind of add to that?
Yeah. So I mean, I think for folks that are looking, it is, we talked about last time, and Laura just hit the nail on the head. So I won't add on too much because I think is really covered, but it is really discouraging. And in our case managers right now, and we'll get into it in a second, but I know. We're going to talk about all the different tools they use. Like I just checked in with them today and they gave me like 5 more websites. Like they're just, scrounging the web, and they drive around, they know all the property management website. Our housing stock is just that low, right, that we're looking in any place possible for housing. So it's very discouraging. So having as much upfront is going to make you look professional. Even if you've got something on your background that might come up, it's already going to put that, it's going to put you in the driver's seat of like, hey, it's like in the job interview when they ask you what your greatest weakness is, right? You don't actually answer what your greatest weakness, you answer what's a problem you've overcome. It's like the trick question, right? And so if you because then you get to control the narrative of how you've overcome something. And that's the same thing, and we might get into a little bit, as if you have an eviction history, if you have poor credit, hey, this is what I'm doing to work on that. And other ways that they can evaluate you as far as screening. But also, and I've got some links too as far as rights, that they can screen you as long as they're doing that to everyone, but they can't consider, and I think, Laura, you kind of hit on this, but right, race, national origin, creed, sex, sexual orientation or gender, veteran or military status, mental or physical disability, marital status, or family. Those are all protected classes in Washington as far as housing discrimination goes. So they cannot discriminate you based off any of those metrics. So it's really tough. And I think right now, because it is a landlord's market, it's really hard to enforce and catch that, right? Because people are so desperate, they're going to play the game. And so it is tricky. But I yeah, when you're ready, Mo, I've got some links for folks to get from WashingtonLawHelp.com to help people read about your rights, because you do have rights in the tenant process and even in the screening process, which I don't know if you want me to jump into now, or Lori can talk about that later.
Well, I'm gonna ask you a question. If you want to start typing that in the chat, this is a question for both of you. So, I took a job with the Navy last year, and it required special clearance, right? And they literally went back to, I mean, like my childhood, where I grew up when I was in, the third grade. I can't remember all that. And so I'm putting down to the best of my ability. I don't remember those things. I mean, my dad knew that stuff, but he's passed. And so if you are doing the best you can and you put information down that is inaccurate, what happens when it comes back and says, well, you didn't live at this address during this time or this was wrong? Do you know what happens if that comes back and that information isn't correct?
Go ahead, Lori.
Oh, cool. Thanks. Um, every landlord's different. The ones that I've heard talk about that are they basically say if it makes sense that they look like they were trying their best, you can usually tell, oh, this address, they said they lived there in 2005, but they actually lived there in 2007. That kind of thing, that makes sense to you when you're a landlord. Although, the best thing to do would be to, ask them beforehand if you get a chance and say, hey, I can't remember that far back. What would you feel good about me putting in there? Because I don't want to lie and I don't want to, make you think I'm trying to omit something. But yeah.
Oh, it's so crazy in that situation. Investigators actually had to come and re-interview me. I mean, they talked to my best friend back then. They were very thorough, and it was like, wow, And it's like I did the best I could. Or if you've signed up for something online and you're resetting your password, and it's like, did you live at this address in Seattle at 98104? And you're like, I have no idea. I can't remember back 25 years when I lived there. So I think it might be a good idea, when you're winding down at the end of the night, even if right now you signed the lease and you're going to be there for the next year, or you got 6 months left, start collecting that information now, because you don't know when you're going to need it. And if you already have it at the ready, it's just going to make things so much simpler for you. Also, please get your credit report. That's free. You can get it for free. Find out what's on there now. Make sure there's no surprises, right? That's a big deal. You don't want to get that shock when it comes time for you to move and it's like, ooh, I got this ding and now I can't get this place.
Yeah, and just to follow up on that, Lori, correct me if I'm wrong, but Moco, one of the biggest ones that does it, they do my screening report. .com, and I know a decent amount of landlords use that. When information is not correct or they can't validate, they just I think they just on the report to the landlord they say cannot confirm. So it just comes up that they couldn't verify, or that they haven't talked with the landlord to actually verify that information. That's how I've seen them. So it's kind of like it's neither good nor bad, right? It's just like you couldn't verify. So some landlord, like Lori said, some landlords might interpret that one way, right? Others might be neutral. Others might, kind of depends on what the landlord's criteria is. But is that your understanding, Lori?
Yeah, that sounds about right. That sounds accurate.
Is that something that you can say that site again there, Matt?
I'll put it in the chat. It's myscr.com.
Can you run that on yourself, Lori? Do you know?
That's a good question. I don't know, actually.
You used to be able to. They recently just changed it. So we used to run that as one, especially our tenants that were, part of our rapid rehousing that are experiencing homelessness. We would sometimes, if we're struggling, we would run that for them. But they've changed recently that you have to actually do it through a landlord now. So
wow.
it's not as easy. Yeah. So we would used to give that. That was an empowering thing too, because that would run credit and eviction. So that's the three things that most of the landlords look at, and that would be all of it, right? You can get your credit report free here. You could do a background check there, and then the courts to get an evict. You would pay $50 and you get everything in one spot. So it's a lot of really useful information. But my understanding right now is that you can't do it. If you're a tenant, you can only do it if you're applying through a landlord. So it's not as it used to be. Whereas it used to be you just pay $50 and you could do it on yourself if you would like. But I'll put that in the chat as well.
Thank you. Now, before we continue, there was a question that came up. We have a a family that's looking for a place, and I think they've heard this from more than one, but definitely from one landlord for sure. They said, "Hey, we don't have a problem. We'll take the Section 8, right? We'll take the voucher. However, if someone comes, before us that has better credit than you, before then, we're going to go with that person." So is that legal? Is that discrimination? Is that, I mean, you're not supposed to say that you can't do it, but then they find these kind of slick ways to navigate around it. Is that okay?
That's a really tough case. I know, and I don't want to dip out. I'm not an attorney, so I'd love an attorney's perspective on that. It's kind of, Marwan, you were talking about some, one of your mentors having a funny saying. Well, one that impacted me was, you can't legislate righteousness. And as much as these tenant laws, right, like protect and they're good and we're all for them, like ultimately, you're right, there'll be some landlords that can slither their way around them to get the tenant that they want, right? And so, one of the links I sent is as a whole about the screening process. And so what a landlord is supposed to do is, there's kind of like, when you fill out an application, they're supposed to give you the types of info the landlord will get as the screening, what information from the screening may cause the landlord to reject your application, if they use a consumer report, and what consumer report they use. So my understanding is no. Like, if basically they're supposed to open it up, and if you're there first and meet the guidelines, no, they're not supposed to have someone like, oh, this person's better. Like, if you met their guidelines, you met their guidelines. So that's my understanding. Again, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't want to give legal advice, but that is my understanding of how this works, is that you have you can have a wait list, right? And then this person's up. If they didn't meet their guidelines, then the landlord has to let you know why you didn't meet their guidelines. But I think holding an application for it now, again, that might happen, and there might be ways to do that legally. I don't know. It does sound a little suspect to me. And I'll just say, on the tenant's behalf, it's very frustrating, right? Because you're like, I'm trying so hard, I meet your guidelines, and you're just going to keep me on the hook, right, until someone else better comes. And if someone doesn't better, that's not a very humane way, right? Like, I mean, yeah. I know. I can only think, if my wife told me that while we were dating, wouldn't make me feel very good, right? Like, well, you're all right, but I'll kind of keep you here on the bench. If no one better comes, then I'll go out on a date with you. That's not.
Well,
it's not.
let me keep it 100. That's how we got into our building downtown. We actually got rejected in the beginning, and it was because of the population we were serving, and they were concerned that there were going to be homeless everywhere. And that was, I actually had to write a statement, and what happened was the better applicant, who looked good on paper, actually didn't come through. So I was looking good enough to get on in. I just had to write the letter. So, hey, blessed and highly favored. Lori, if someone does experience that, and we don't know, right? We're not legal experts, and it may seem unethical or kind of nasty to do. But if they can do it and it's legal, folks are going to do what they got to do, right? Landlords have been strained for almost, a year and a half, and they've got to try to make their money. They want to make sure they have a tenant that's going to take care of the unit, that's going to pay on time. And so I can understand it. I can empathize with them from that standpoint. But at the same time, we have people out here looking for it. So if they hear that, what would you advise, that potential renter to counter that? What could they say that might ease that landlord a little bit?
That's a good question. Just try to appeal to their sense of, a family would be doing me a huge, I have such limited options to begin with. Is there any way, we can talk about this? I sent, my application, even if you feel that somebody might be more competitive, I just have so many less options. I would just try that. Just try to see if you can appeal to that
And
sense of like, you be doing a really good thing.
that goes back to the original question that I wanted to table for a second, because you had mentioned getting to know the landlord, right? So you're looking for a space. So what are some of those ways? I've called, I wanted to check out the unit. Maybe you show it to me. How do I do that where
Mhm.
I'm ingratiating myself, but I'm not coming off as desperate either, right?
No, not at all. That's a good question. So I personally like if you're looking for jobs and you're looking for a job that you really want to connect with, you are going to go find out a little bit about the company. You're going to say, "Oh, okay, this I like this company's culture or their values or whatever it is that you liked about the company to begin with." I would say maybe look at it like that. So you say, "Oh, I love this house. It's really nice. It's right in the right school district. Um, it has these features that I'm really into," and let them know, like, hey, I love this house. It is really nice. I'm going to take good care of it. I'm just really interested in it. Is there a way we can, I can see the unit? Also, just make sure to read the job, not job description, the listing, because sometimes it'll say no phone calls or sometimes it'll say phone calls only. So obviously respect that first. But yeah, just be upfront about it. Hey, I mean, the people that have told me that how they've done that is exactly it. They just say, I really like this house and it's really nice. I would take great care of it like it would be my own. I have a family that go into just a little bit, and I would say role playing would be a good. Oh, there we go. You just put that in there. Role playing, and if you ever have questions about how to do that, and you're a Section 8 participant or shopper, call me, and I'll be happy to go over that with you.
So I love that. So, role playing, how to talk and get to know the landlord. And what you said to me was really powerful that I haven't heard before was, do your research. Like if you're trying to buy a home, typically you'll do a Zillow search and you're looking at the neighborhood and looking at the scores. How far is it from the local schools? What's the crime rate? So you can do that same thing for the place that you're looking to rent. And if you can speak to that, like your house is in this place where it's perfect for my kids to get to the park and we're close to the school or the bus line. And, as you said, I'm going to take care of this place and this place has old bones or whatever. And just trying to connect on that. You guys are both nodding your head. Yeah. So jump in there. I love that, Lori. Thank you for that. I'm typing that right now.
Yeah, it's amazing Laura, I agree with you 100%. Some what relationships will grease a lot of wheels and open doors, right? If you can have that rapport. So, but it is a tight, and I'm more wine on the schedule. You had how much is too much information versus not enough, right? And that's a really tight balance. Back to some of the legal side, you can ask, and the landlord has to tell you what criteria they're specifically going to look at. So legally, they have to show you that. So that's another way to just know exactly how they're evaluating you, right? And then what agency they're going to use to run your background check. And then if they deny you can ask them for why, and they have in writing to give it to you. So then that could be information too of like what happened, and then that can help you going forward. And the other thing I'll add too is if you suspect your rights are being violated, like we've said before, call the clear line too. Right? If the building doesn't work, if everything else fails, and you're just frustrated, at least you can see if you have any legal options. Landlord didn't tell you why they denied you, or if you feel like they didn't properly let you know what criteria they're using, then you might have some legal options. So just there is that piece for for actors that aren't following the law.
Go ahead, Lori.
Oh, uh, so Matt, to piggyback off of that, I would say, especially if you pay an application fee, you need something in writing. So be okay with the idea that you may get rejected a few times. I was rejected when I was searching for an apartment too. It happens, and don't take it personally. I know it's hard, much easier said than done. But especially if you pay the application fee and submitted the application, they still don't give you something in writing, then definitely um, that would be a follow up. I would assume because that's just you need to know what it is that made them say I'm going to go with another candidate.
And all for you extroverts out there that are typically chatty Cathys or chatty Kins, use that to your benefit, right? If you're kind of worried about the hard grilling questions, you don't want to divulge that you have a voucher right off the bat, then making this conversation will help them feel comfortable, but you can actually steer the conversation, right? So you could talk about the house and talk about how long they've owned it and things like that, and just you're 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 definitely interested and you're serious. You're not wasting their time, but you're also not, just so nervous and coming off as desperate or divulging more than you need to or you have to. So I think that's important too. So Matt is putting there in the chat, facing legal issues outside of King County other than eviction foreclosure. Call the Clear hotline at 888-201-1014. Weekdays 9:15 to 12:15 p.m. And is it fair to say, Matt and Lori, that if you call this number, you need to continue to keep looking? It's not like it's going to freeze and they're going to put someone out if they've rented the spot to someone, right? That person's going to be in, and whatever happens might happen on the back end, but you need to keep looking, right?
Yeah, and that's a good point too. Is when a lot of times landlords do get away with discrimination or not following the rule, especially right now when there's a lot of new rules, right? And so yeah, you might not get resolution right away, and that's a really frustrating process. But by calling Clear, you might have your own options, or you also might help some of the Northwest Justice lawyers, recognizing issues and solving some of the community wide stuff. So, but you're right, it does not. In many cases, it might not get resolved right away. So you're exactly right, Marwan.
Yeah, I see sometimes, folks that are looking for places, they'll fall in love with the spot and it's like, man, this is it. It's like, don't put all your eggs in one basket. It's great if it works out, but you got to keep looking, keep looking, keep looking, that's a negotiation tactic too, right? You can like it, but don't love it so much that they know that you really love it. So just a little pro tip there. So Lori, continue on.
Oh no, I didn't really have anything to add to that, but I definitely agree.
All right, so you know what? I had another question for you. How should you show up? Should I wear a tie? How should I look when I come looking at a place? So I've made the phone call and yes, you can come Saturday at 1 p.m. and you show up. What should I look like?
Um, I mean, I don't know if you have to wear a tie unless you want to, unless that's like what you normally wear. Uh, Obviously, you want to show up like when you're like when you're going around asking. Basically, I'm gonna age myself, but when I was searching for a job when I was a teenager, it was like in person, and so you get fairly nicely dressed and you go ask for an application, you go fill it out, kind of the same train of thought, right? You also, if you do have if you're driving there in a car, you want to make sure your car's cleaned out and stuff like that. I've heard of landlords looking in the car just to see. And like I said, it's not. I'm not saying it's objectively fair or right, but it just might be something that they might do. And so there's one more thing. But yeah, try your best to make that good impression. Make it
I'm,
a good
I'm
impression.
smiling. I got to give you the horn first off. Awesome tip, right? You don't think about that. The landlord may walk you back to your car, and
Mhm.
you may have been really selling it, and then they see that the car is just a pigsty on the inside, and they're like, well, if you take care of your car this way, how are you going to take care of my house? That is huge, man. See, it's those little nuggets there that you're just not going to get anywhere else. That's awesome.
And yeah, it doesn't mean that I we agree with that kind of way of thinking or we disagree. It's more of just like, yeah, there's one more thing that, keep in mind. So yeah, just go in there, say, if I was trying to convince this person that I'm a good fit for a job, what would I say? How would I dress? How would I talk? Do the same. It is like finding a job.
Well, Matt, I want to hear from you, but let's flip it on its head, right? For most people, this is their most expensive asset that they have, and it may be the most expensive thing they've ever bought in their life. So now they're saying, "I'm going to turn over this $300,000 property to you to take care of and pay me rent, but it cost me $300,000, and I'm still paying a mortgage on it, right?" So, yeah, they should be kind of looking side-eyed and saying, "Are you going to take care of this? Are you going to pay me on time?" You know what I mean, Matt? Jump in there.
Yeah, and so and I think this is right onto that question, Marwan. On the agendas, what's too much information, what's not enough information, and that's why you're right. Building that relationship, I think, is key. Having that, hey, this is kind of what I'm about. Here's some references, right? You look professional. but you don't have to share, every single story or problem, right? I mean, because unless you really want to, I guess. But just know a landlord doesn't have a right to look in all your background, right? And that's what you ask, because you should tell, hey, what are you actually screening for? And that might be where I would talk about, hey, all right, you're going to find this, you might find that, like, but this is how I've dealt with that. And that's maybe how that conversation can go, right? Is like, okay, you're going to screen, you need a credit score of this, right? No evictions or whatever, whatever it may be. And that might open the door, like, well, I do have an eviction, but I'm working on an order of limited dissemination, right? Because I don't feel like I was treated fairly. I'm actually paying it off. A lot of landlords, when they hear you're actually paying it off, right, or have gotten it paid off, that might open the door, even if the eviction's still on your record. So that might be where you can have some conversation, open up, hey, here's my plan, this is what I'm doing, right? And that can kind of be that conversation piece of you don't need to go into everything, right? Because it's not the FBI, they're not investigators, right? But you're right, they do. A lot of landlords, especially the local ones that might be more flexible, this might be their second or third home, right? They're not a company, and so you're right, it's something that's very personal. It's something that it's their asset, right? Maybe it's their retirement, whatever it is. And so yeah, they want you to know that there'll be that mutual respect, right? Just like we want the landlord to treat you as a human, right? Not jerk you around in the application process. They want you to know, they want to know that you're going to respect that property. And I think and if that mutual respect is shown, then you might get some doors unlocked. But this process is hard, and like you said, it might not happen right away. This might be the 10th, 15th landlord that you talk to, especially if you've got an eviction or poor credit history or whatnot. And I really empathize for folks that are going from door to door to door, and they're having it slammed over and over again. That is it is really hard. Is really hard right now, and it's a landlord's market. They've got the cream of the crop clients, right, or tenants, and they can be pretty picky right now and really raise those standards. So I don't know, Lori, do you have anything to add to that about the conversation with like how would you manage, Lori, the conversation with the landlord? How much to share versus and open up that mutual respect, but how much to share versus not to share? I'm kind of curious what you have to say on that.
I think I would try to keep it positive. Obviously, at first, don't go in there off the gate and say, I have really bad credit and, you know, I'm this
Mm-hmm.
and that. And, might scare them off a bit. Um, go in there and just be like, hey, this is what I like about the property. This is
Mm-hmm.
how I would take care of it. Then when you start asking them, hey, I've been interested in applying, could I ask you some questions about the application process? That's when you
Mm-hmm.
can really feel out what they're looking for. If they didn't put it in their description, like some places will just have it listed out, minimum this, or
Mm-hmm.
no evictions, or uh, you know, you'll see how flexible somebody is after reading their description and after talking to them. They say, hey, I have a question about the rental application process. Would be a great way to kind of get started and put those feelers out because every single person's going to be different, right?
So there's a question in the chat here. What do you think about going through the process with places you don't want to live? So maybe going to a different apartment complex, calling, meeting them, walking through a unit, practicing those soft skills, making conversation. What do you think about that? Because it's in a live environment. You could practice with your mom or a family member, and you're more comfortable. You might be laughing, back and forth with each other, but you get in a live environment, all of a sudden you start getting sweaty, you get a little nervous, your voice starts to cracking. So what do you think about that as a strategy?
I mean, I wouldn't say it's a bad strategy. I would just make sure that you know exactly what it is you're trying to practice at, right? So find out what is it that you're concerned about happening. That way you can kind of pay special attention. And if, like I said, if you're a Section 8 participant with Bremerton Housing, I'm always happy to be your test subject. And since you don't know me that well, it might be kind of like the same thing, right?
Now, do you ever go and look at locations, Lori, with the with voucher holders?
I have not yet, but if there is a certain circumstance that called for it, I would be able to.
Oh, hey, all right now.
Yeah. Certain programs, we have the EHV program. Those are the ones where I can really become very involved, and then other situations as well. But yeah.
So, Matt, what do you think about that question? Do you think it's a good idea to go through that process to places that you don't want to go to try to kind of get through those nerves and work on? Let's say you do get nervous because it's such high stakes, right? Like I really need a place and I don't want to mess this up and I don't want to overshare, but I want to say the right things. I want them to get to know me, and you know,
Yeah, I mean, I'm like Lori said, I definitely don't think it's a bad idea as far as practice, right? Anytime just like job interviews, the more you interview, the better you get. I'm also very sympathetic that applications cost money, right? So it's an expense to go in there, and some of these application fees can range from $40 to $100. So it's not an insignificant amount. So that's why I love what Lori's offering, for free to do, that role play and to help. I know if you're working with one of our case managers, they're always there, to help and even walk you through that process. But there's many people that aren't, that don't have that support, and that is tricky, to do that. So, you can always go in, a place and just practice talking with a manager, and actually go through the application process. So that'd be a way to do it for free, right? Just go in and just shake hands and, well, not shake hands. It's like, the COVID bump, right? But the elbow, yeah, got your elbow, and that'd be a way to just kind of practice talking with leasing and leasing agents, right? They they're just like everyone else, right? They're people, right? They get nervous and they want to and that's their job to treat people well, but they get stressed, and a lot of times they deal with folks that are very unhappy because they're getting denied, right? So if you go in there, like we've all said, and hey, this is what I'm at, and show that respect, and I think they can open up some doors. So no, I think it's an okay idea. I think the follow up to that is a lot of people are finding that they have to go to places they don't want to go, and we're seeing that all the time, and that's a really tough issue because that's just the only places that are open, right? We big believers in client voice and choice, right? People do better if they actually get a say in where they want to live, right? Because they know they're in particular situation better than anyone else. But the reality is it's very hard to live in a specific neighborhood, right? The market is just so tight. So I think even as going there, and you might not want to live in that place, but it also gives you the experience of like, could I live in this place? Or it can help you with your decision making process, because your options of where you might want to live are limited right now, and that's that's really for everyone, and that's again a really tough piece of looking for housing in our market right now.
Would it make sense to maybe ask some of those? Let's say you did do a practice like that. I went to a unit that I definitely wasn't going to live in. Maybe it was like a way out of my price range, or a place where it's like, my kids aren't going to school there. Like these are absolute no's. But I go there, to practice. Would it be beneficial maybe to ask the property manager, what do they look for? Like, can they spot, their future tenants? Hey, I've been doing this for 2 years, and you're walking around the unit. It's like, so how do you guys know who's going to be a good fit, and do they match? What could possible questions be if that's even a value, Lori?
I have so many. Oh yeah, that's a really good question. I have so many things I want to say to that. I would say first off, Google is going to be your best friend when you're saying like, what do property managers look for? You're going to see so many articles about this is what I look for, because everyone's different, right? And then it's even more interesting when you drill it down because you're going to be talking about big landlords, or I would say the big companies versus small time landlords. So when you got small time landlords, you're going to see a lot more flexibility than with the big, large, huge apartment complexes that are owned by usually people out of state. Um, so yeah, if you want to call around, do it. But yeah, I would even start by just going to Google and saying, there's a ton of landlord forums out there as well, where they will talk to each other about this, that, the other, about Section
Oh,
8,
wow.
about anything else. Yeah, exactly. And so you can kind of get a feel for what a lot of them will say. Okay, no, this would be a deal breaker. This would be okay. I could work on that. Yeah.
Oh, I like it. I like it. And so earlier I put a clean car and coach bag. So, based on you saying make sure your car is clean, one, that could be a conversation starter. Most people own cars. Many people have, some type of affinity toward vehicles. I don't, but it's just kind of a, to or from. But it can be a conversation starter. And then again, you can actually use that to make your point, right? So there is a lot of stigma around voucher holders, and are you going to tear up the unit and this and that, especially if they haven't had the experience or they've had bad experiences. So being able to show that would be a way for you to stage how clean you are, right? And how organized you are. And then, if for folks that have coach bags that know that you don't put them on the ground, right? You got to take care of that thing. So the coach bag gets a chair. I had to learn that the hard way. I put someone's purse on the floor. That's the last time I did that. So
And if they don't have a car, they can definitely, if they have a neighbor, former neighbor, former landlord, someone that can say, "Oh no, I remember when they lived next door, and I was always this, that, the other." Someone that can vouch for that. That would be another option too.
yeah, or like you said, if there's not a car, maybe you're walking past someone else's unit and you see that they really do a really good upkeep on the front of their unit. It's like, see, this is just how I keep my place, right? And so you're sending that signal to them. This is how I live, right? Your place is going to be, nice and pristine. I'm going to take care of it like my own. And here's a visual example to kind of trigger that thought on there.
Right. And then yeah, there's so many other things that you can try and do. But yeah, I guess it is at the end of the day, you're trying to sell it. You're trying to sell yourself and doing it in any way, shape, or form. Yeah, there's a lot of creative ideas out there. So sorry, I don't know where I was going with that.
It's just listening to you guys talk, like all this stuff is like, oh, you could try this or you could do that. Oh, that sounds pretty awesome. And, because I want to try to remove that anxiety and that stigma, right? It's so hard to find a place. And as I said, I started off with one pessimistic statement, but wanted to be optimistic overall and say, well, yes, this is the scenario, but here are a bunch of tools that you can use. And the person that's willing to engage and practice with those tools, will find that navigation through, right? So using, Matt and yourself, Lori, and then and working on these things to have those conversations, right? And maybe you take the person that you role play with and you kind of have some scenarios that you can kind of navigate through if you don't have transportation. Should you take your kids with you, or should you try to go on your own?
Hmm.
I would say, I mean, yeah, because childcare is so hard to find, and I know it's very pricey, and unless you have a friend or family member, I would say just if you have to, you bring your kids, especially if it's going to be like 15, 20 minutes. I don't think that would be any issue. And in fact, it might even be a nice way to show, hey, this is my family, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and they can't discriminate off of your household members, right? The number of household members. So they really shouldn't do that. That definitely is in the illegal status. So I yeah, if that's a deal breaker, again, there's definitely other issues for sure. But I mean, I understand your question, Marwan, because sometimes it's with if you have all the kids, right, it's hard to focus on all the different forms and reading everything, right? So I could see, if available, but just like Lori said, yeah, and it's not always easy, right? It's not always easy to pay all the application fees, and then it's not always easy to find childcare. So I think you got to work with what you got, and it's and it's hard, but I think. Yeah, I think both ways could be beneficial depending. Again, yeah, just this whole trying to present, right? Trying to present well, right? Trying to sell yourself so that you can actually get that place. And it's hard.
And it's having a conversation about it, right? So you're waiting for that call back. The phone doesn't ring for a few days, then someone does call. You look at a place and maybe you get disqualified, or you find out the next day it's already gone. It's like, oh my goodness. So everything, it does drive the stakes up, right? So I think it can be beneficial or it can be a detriment if it's nap time, or you know uh
Mm-hmm.
Bobby is sick, and his tantrum time, that might not present well, but at the same time, kids are very endearing, right? I do need this place for me and my family, and the school is why I want to live here. And this is Bobby. And, Bobby's is going to love it here. And Bobby's running through, this is going to be my room, mommy. This could be my room, daddy. That could be very ingratiating too. So it's just, just knowing what your tools are. I think a lot of times we don't realize that we have this whole deck of tools and we're sitting here like, well, what do I do? I don't have anything. It's just, this is what I got. And this is how I present on paper. And it's like, no, you actually have all these assets. You just have to recognize their assets and then use them appropriately.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to also add that Section 8 participants who are shopping right now through any of the programs that Bremerton Housing is doing, or I should say the ACV program and the EHV program, we will help with your application fees. So at least there's that, and that's for the next couple months. So we got you on that. I know it's not much, but we can do that. Definitely do that.
I think a little bit helps.
Yeah, exactly. Especially because they're about $50 each, which is incredibly. That's a lot, and it's for every household adult.
Mm-hmm.
So that can add up very quickly if you have 3-4 people. That's a lot of money. Yeah, exactly. So we can help with that for the next couple of months. And I just also wanted to say, I think this is just as an overall broad. All of these are just tips, and I don't want anyone to go away with the impression that I'm saying, well, if you don't do the way I say it, then you're not doing it right, because this is a judgment call at the end of the day. You got to feel out for what the other person, when you're talking to in a conversation, is out there with. So yeah, I don't want anyone to ever feel like, well, Lori said I had to do it this way, because I don't want to limit you at all.
No, absolutely. Go ahead, Matt.
No, I was just going to say that's a good caveat too. And I was even thinking myself of like, just kind of talking through this, what came to mind, and especially after hearing Lori say that is, I hope no one takes this as that we endorse the status quo, right? These ways of presenting, there's all types of ways that these aren't equitable for different members of our community, right? Either because they're at a cultural disadvantage, because they're not the same, don't come from the same background, right, as the actual landlord, right? We're talking about childcare, we're talking about money, transportation, right? There's all types of ways that it's hard, to present well, right? And so, we're giving these strategies of how to kind of work in a tight market, but we also don't, endorse that this is like a good system for why people get housing, right? Like we believe everyone should be housed regardless. It's just working in our system. So I want to kind of add that too, along with, Lori's great caveat there, is that, this is not prescriptive. It's kind of what works. And also, this system of, is not necessarily the fairest system, but it's what we have. And we're trying to work within that system. So I definitely want to add that as well, as especially if people are frustrated that we're giving them a long to-do list of stuff that's like, I can barely, make it through with all the challenges, right? Let alone, clean my car or come, totally understand, and it's hard. And we're just trying to give you some tools in the toolbox. But we also understand sometimes just getting up in the morning is a victory for a lot of folks. So
yeah,
just want to add that.
And I'll definitely, second both of those statements, but it is important that folks have tangibles. A lot of times, when people are help seeking, right? They're like, well, you need a positive attitude, and you just need to do this and you need to do that. It's like, give me something tangible to do. I need something. Give me one thing that I can do, and I can check that up. Like, I could do that. So, a lot of times it's like, it's all really good kind of over surface advice, but few things that I can actually try, and then I can say, okay, that worked, it didn't work, I can reject it. That worked, that didn't work, I can reject it. And then you can add and put it in and pull it out as you want. But yes, just as both of you were saying, right, there isn't going to be one good way to do it, right? One day that person, you go through the checkout, right, and the person that's in front of you is just jaw jacking and yakking it up with the cashier. And then when it's your turn, the cashier doesn't even speak to you. And it's like, well, what happened? You guys were talking like you were old family. Now, I'm like stranger danger. Like, what's going on? And it's like, it could be that fast, right? And the next day it could be you that's the chatty Cathy with the rental agent. So you just don't know. And so it really is being practiced and being comfortable in your own skin. And when you're under pressure, right? We know when the situation is anxious, then you start getting nervous and those things start to kind of fall out. But with plays, with sports, with anything, all of these things are transferable skills. So as you practice it, the more comfortable you will be, and then you'll perform a little bit better under pressure. And so that's why I like to kind of put those tangible things in there. So, Lori, did we get into the application enough, or do we need to touch more on there?
Actually, I wanted to say a couple things, and that's a good segue. Um, to piggyback off of both Matt and what Marwan said, I agree. I see there are both sides of that, and it's true. It's hard to navigate the system as it is right now, and we're all just trying our best, and it's imperfect. And
Mhm.
on the other, and on the other side of that, I do see the whole, positive of giving people tangibles, because at least that's one
Mhm.
little deliverable in black and white. At the end of the day, though, it's like we are we understand so much how stressful this is. I get it. I get the dread. I get the anxiety. I get that feeling of just not knowing what is going to happen next. And just that being said, I don't know if that helps, but know that that is what motivates me, and I know that that's what motivates a lot of my coworkers. So, with that being said, I would recommend, as a maybe a homework
Oh, I
assignment,
love homework. Go ahead now.
Google a free rental application, fill it out. Do it in Microsoft Word. Do it if you can print it out. Do that. Whatever it is, get that information collected. So then, when you're going to apply online, and you're going to apply mostly online, but sometimes in person, you have that all there, and you're not worried about, God, where did I live 10 years ago? Who was my landlord? What was their phone number? And on and on and on. So there you go. There's your homework assignment. Hopefully, hopefully it's not too much.
No, I'm typing that in the chat. And earlier I was saying, it might be a good idea to even if you're not moving now, to start
Yeah.
gathering that information, right? You're currently living in that place. Do you have all the information for that place? Put it
Hmm.
in a Google Doc, put it in a Word doc, save it something that you're going to remember what you named it later on.
Exactly.
But
Yep.
make sure you have it, or print it out and put it in a file folder called housing or something like that. So you have it and start to collect those things, because when you need a job, again, I'm big on transferable skills. So when you need a job and now you need to recall, all the places you worked and what you did, now that, that's stressful, because it's
Mhm.
hard to find work. It's hard to find housing. So if you have this stuff up front, and it's already there, then you're good, right? Um, and there's just one less thing that you have to do, so it cuts down your anxiety. Do you want to kind of embellish that there, Matt?
No, I think yeah, Lori hit the nail on the head, and yeah, and yeah, and when I kind of caveated about endorsing the system, yeah, I know you don't endorse the system either, Marwan, and I love the practical stuff. I was just wanting to clarify that these are some options, but we're not, because I imagine some people just hearing this and feeling very frustrated about all the stuff they have to do to get housing, right? And that's yeah, there's all types of issues with that. But I love the that you do are very solutions minded and giving people practical tools, and that hopefully people can realize this is if this tool fits, great. If not, they can leave it back on the shelf, right?
Well, let me give you both a horn. This isn't mandatory for you guys to appear on the podcast. So when they say they actually care, they do care, right? We're here for a reason, and it is to provide information, right?
Yeah, yeah.
It really is a scenario of hate the player, don't hate the game, or hate the game, don't hate the player, right? I mean, we're the players, and we really are here trying to bend over backwards and find ways to
Mhm.
get you housing and to secure it and cut down all that anxiety and frustration. But it is we understand it's immensely difficult,
Yeah,
especially if you
yeah,
have different things that you're facing, whether it's credit or something on your record,
yeah.
or employment, or having a voucher, right? Whatever the case may be, you don't have to have any of those things, and you're trying to find
Mhm.
housing now that's within your budget. That's going to be stressful, right? So it's not just for people that have a voucher, right? This is for everyone. You know, these are the tools that you're going to need to find the place that hopefully you want to live, and you don't have to compromise and just
Mhm.
take what comes available. Like, well, I don't want to really live here, but there's nothing else, and these people said yes. I mean, at the end of
Mhm.
the day, you have housing, and that's great, but everyone wants to live where they want to live, and that's what Matt was talking about earlier. So, you know, again, these folks are here because they want to be here, not because they have to be here. And so just immensely grateful for that. And every Monday, right? And I see, just as an aside, many organizations, because they're so busy, they're like, okay, we'll meet monthly, right? They come on every week. They come on every Monday, you know, and that is a testament to their dedication, right? Being able to provide that information to you, to try to give you some tools, to try to cut down that anxiety, to make sure that you have the most up to date information. I'm asking Jill. Jill, do you know if the moratorium is going away? Do you know? She's like, no, I don't know. Do you know if the moratorium? Yep, they extended a month. Jill, do you know? Well, actually, the bridge is going to end. So we've got it up to date as soon as it comes through, and then she can talk about some of the things that are going on, what Bremerton Housing Authority is trying to do to open up housing, right? You can find out what KCR is trying to do in order to, get those moving costs or rapid rehousing and the different programs and how they work, right? So now it's like, oh, okay, well, they are trying to do these things, but they are very limited, right? It's musical chairs. You've got 100 chairs, but you got 1,000 people that want to sit down. So what do? And you're trying to navigate within the system. So it is immensely difficult. So I'm very thankful to you both for that.
Well, thanks, Marwan. Yeah, I really appreciate that. And also, definitely same to you. I think I'm seeing now that you're doing multiple podcasts a day on top of your normal work at Gather Together, Grow Together. So this is not a requirement for you, same thing. So we, again, very, very appreciative of all the communication work that you're doing, because, this is a way for us to communicate, with clients and fulfill our duties and our mission. And so I think the Conduit is very successful in that respect. So very mutual. And thank you for setting this all up. Appreciate it.
I appreciate that. Can I ask about some of the housing strategies in our question? So like Zillow, Craigslist, where are some places that people can try to look for housing?
Right now, Zillow is probably the best place to start. Do Craigslist. Look up local property management companies and just do a sweep through their site as well. Sometimes they will post it on Zillow and sometimes they won't. There's Facebook Marketplace, and those are definitely, I think those are generally the main ones. And if you know somebody who drives around and says, like, let's say someone who does deliveries, or who's Amazon delivery driver or Uber driver, you can always ask them to snap a picture of any for rent sign.
Ooh, I like that. That's a good one. And Facebook Marketplace, I haven't looked on there. So Facebook Marketplace is a new one that I haven't heard. There's like Redfin and a few other ones that are like Zillow that might be, might have a different listing. I'm not sure. And then what was that? Oh, and then having people drive around and take pictures. That's a big one too, because it may be for rent by owner or for sale by owner, and they're not posting it anywhere. Is that kind of what you're thinking?
Once in a while, I see that. So people that are mom and pop landlords that are like, I don't want to deal with the headache of doing this online and then taking it down and then and then getting flooded with calls. So they just put it up because you're, like you said, it's a landlord's market. Or sorry, that was Matt. It makes it easier for them. So yeah, if you know somebody who can, kind of keep their eyes peeled, there's another way. There's all these different ways, right? Yeah.
That seems kind of cool to if your kids go to a certain school, maybe drive around the neighborhood on the weekend and just see if there are any for rent signs up, or you see any signs of folks moving or something like that.
Yep.
Because you never know, right? Serendipity does happen from time to time. Now, I wanted to ask: are there any kind of blind spots that you see that clients have, where they kind of come up? It's there's a pattern, right? Many folks come in and they seem to kind of be missing this, and you just need to focus a little bit more there.
Marwan, before we jump into that, I know my case managers let me know. There's also Trulia and Rents.com that they're using too, in addition to Redfin and Zillow and Facebook Marketplace. But there's a Rents.com and then Apartments for Rent. And then Trulia, there are a few others that they're grinding out. And then also they've had some success also going to Picket Property Management, Good Property Management, Viewcrest, and I think it's Northwest Olympic. Those are some of the big ones of actually going to their website directly to get information. So I just wanted to throw that out there, is that in addition to the driving, Lori, that's a great, I mean, our case managers do that too, driving around looking for places. So those are all tactics we use. I just wanted to add a few pieces to that.
Oh, one thing I forgot. If people who are searching with the voucher would like me to add them to an email list, I look for listings that fall within our payment standards, and I email them out at least every other day. So if that's something you're interested in, email me at there's my email address right there, landlord@bremertonhousing.org, and I can add you, and you can go from there. You still gotta make the call and all that, but at least you have the start where you know that that's going to fit in with a certain payment standard and whatnot. So
Absolutely. So what were there some blind spots there?
I haven't really ever thought of that. I will have to get back to you on that one. I wish I had a better answer.
Sometimes folks come in, it's like, it's just they seem to always miss this on the application, or they can't, they don't have their employment history, or there's something that just kind of seems to be a pattern with a few folks that are coming in.
Okay, I see now what you're saying. That's definitely something that I'm seeing with the rental application, because it's so overwhelming that they don't like, I have to get my ID card. Do I have a copy of it? Do I have a copy of my driver's license or my ID, my social security card? Do I have a landlord from 4 or 7 years ago, for example? Do I remember who my supervisor was at the place I worked at 4 years ago? All of that can really knock you off your feet when you're just trying to get an application in, especially when you're like, I only have an hour to do this. I need to get this done. So that if that's a blind spot, yeah, just be prepared and then do your homework assignment and do your best to fill out all of those things as much as you can to anticipate being asked something that is going to make you kind of take pause.
Lori, do you need your physical social security card or just the number?
I believe it's the number, but I've had people ask, or I've had people tell me that when they're applying, they need to upload pictures of things like driver's licenses and stuff like that. And I'm not sure about social security card, but definitely picture of their driver's license. So that might be something else. You need to scan it, take a picture of it, and make sure you remember where it's saved. So then when you get to that point, you're like, oh, yep, I know where that's saved. Let me upload that.
And that can take weeks. So make sure it's not expired. If it's getting close, it's time to start renewing it, because it's going to take a while for them to mail the new one to you. Right. Yeah. If you need a social security card, that could take even longer. You don't want to wait on these things. So now is the time to start, do that homework. And when you check that out and you're like, oh, I'm missing that, get it done now so you have it.
Yeah. And if you don't have it, or you need a temporary one, or even if it's expired, that's still better than obviously not having anything at all. So, but yeah, it's definitely the time to start is now, and as soon as possible.
Matt, do your folks see any kind of trends, where folks are, kind of missing something, a little blind spot?
Yeah, no, Lori hit a lot of them, so I won't reiterate that, but that's a lot of what we deal with is just we call it getting document ready, right? It's a process to be document ready. And the more that you can do that and be document ready, right? Especially with how fast these places are going. So I think definitely second with Lori. The thing I'll say maybe is more on the legal side of understanding, like kind of like I mentioned earlier, is understanding what the criteria, and you can ask, what is the criteria that they're going to screen you on? And then also, if you are in that next phase, many people, what we see is if there's not a case manager there sometimes to slow them down, they'll just sign that lease, right? Because they're so excited. But make sure you're understanding what you're signing, because that is spend the time to actually go through that and read. You'll find some, like in my lease, actually reading it, my landlord said, oh, you can't wash your car in the driveway, right? Just a weird random rule. And I wouldn't, they could have wrote me up if I didn't, read that rule. So, there's all types of stuff that they can throw in there. So that's what I would just caution. Like, I know it's tight, but you are signing that you're going to follow this. And sometimes you can talk of like, hey, if there's a rule in there, you might be able to get the lease amended if you actually take the time, to read it. And and if you're qualified, right, it's worth it to spend an hour or so to read that lease, understand the screening criteria, one, but then also making sure you're reading your lease and understand your obligation. That's a lot of times we find people are in trouble. It's because, I didn't realize that, these are the quiet hours, right? Quiet hours is a big one, right? Or I didn't realize that, and then that can lead to some issue with the property manager.
And I'll say, this isn't a typical situation, but when you plan a new business, that can take years in the planning. And so when I moved into the place I'm in now, I knew I was going to start a business and I was going to start it out of my home. And so I needed to make sure that I was in a mixed use property so that I could do that. And so the landlord knew that, I was going to do this, but he wasn't quite sure of the scale. So it's important. The relationship that we have is good enough that I was able to navigate it as G2 grew so quickly that we had to get a building downtown, right? So that, maintaining that relationship and building that relationship is really important. And so if I have any issues, I can give them a call and they're more than happy to do things. Sometimes I'll do it and they'll reimburse me. Or there was a time when my landlord was struggling and offered me a pretty severe discount. I think, was it last year or the year before? If I paid 2 or 3 months of rent, they took off a bunch of they took off like 20% of my rent to pay it up for them. So I was able to do that, which was, a help to them. So, we've got this symbiotic relationship. So I may or may not be building a big shed on the back, and they don't know about that yet, but we're not going to talk about that. Just saying. But it's all for the good, right? I've got 2 full-size freezers in the back because, we've got our food program and whatnot. So, it is what it is, but it's all for the good. But, it's just kind of things like that. It's just important to have that good relationship, and that we have. So when it came up to, time to renew the lease, he did raise our rent like many landlords do, but it wasn't astronomical. I thought it was fair and reasonable. And then he gave me the option. He's like, "Hey, you could do month to month. We could do 6 months. We could do a year." And that's the relationship that we've built. And so, I just stay in touch, and not when things are bad. Sometimes it's just like, "Hey, just want to let you know everything's all good," and it just kind of keeps that relationship okay. And you never know. Many landlords talk with each other. They may have, I don't have a place because now you're getting larger and you need a place, but I've got a friend that owns a property over here and I'll vouch for you because you've been a great tenant for me. So is there so many different ways that you can build and sustain and grow relationships with the people that you're with.
If I could give you a buzzer, I'd give you one for that last bit, Marwan. There you go.
So we're over a little long. I just got one last real quick question before we go today. I mean, sometimes it's like, oh, what are we going to talk about today? And then it's like, oh man, this filled the whole show and then some. So it's awesome. My other question was this. What are some frequently asked questions from the client's point of view when they come in and they're just kind of a deer in the headlights? I'm stressed out. I've got to find a place. What are you hearing kind of over and over as their concerns? What are their FAQs?
Let me think about that for a second, Matt. If you want to step in, because that's I know that I get a lot of them. So
yeah, I mean, we a lot of just not understanding how to apply, right? Even just the how to apply. How do I go from the Craigslist to actually getting there? And then so just the actual mechanics of it are difficult for some folks. And I get it, right? Because well, we just told you about 7 different websites to use, right? All different, right? And then each apartment complex, different process. So I think that's a really common one, is even just the mechanics of how to apply. And then what we talked about too is actually going to the landlord. What do they need to ask, right? What's important, and actually understanding the screen. What many are very confused with why they got denied, right? Or they don't understand that process, right? And that's why I think it's so important, Marwan, what you were talking. Pretty much most of the stuff that we talked about today are questions we get. Why was I denied? I don't know why I'm getting denied. That's a very common one, right? Or they think that many aren't understanding the the holding fees. That's another one we get, and that's a sneaky fee that is popping up more and more and more. Is that you have to pay your application fee of $40 to $100, and then to even go to the next stage, you have to come up with $300 holding fees. And so many are kind of really confused about that process, and which is difficult for many to come up with and hold. They want it to hold the apartment so that they can't, they won't give it to someone else, I guess. And I think sometimes that's out of your deposit. Sometimes that's, just an admin fee that they just charge. We're seeing admin fees rise. So I think there's a lot of confusion regarding, the even what they can even charge at the beginning, right? We're seeing more admin fees, deposits go up. And that's great if you're working, with an emergency housing voucher, rapid rehousing. We can help with those, but many people aren't. And so I have a lot of sympathy for folks with, you have to not only come with a deposit, but now you have an additional admin fee and $300. So that's a big question that we get in, is like, why, how do I even navigate this, right? And so that's what, again, asking up front, is there holding fees? Is there, what are you going to charge me to hold this place, right? Trying to get that all, because they do have to tell you, they need to tell you how much the screening fee is, right? Well, who they're using, does the holding fee come out of the deposit? They do need to be upfront about that. So that's a big confusion, is all the different charges surrounding, and it's very discouraging to folks when you think, oh, I qualify, and now I got to come up with even more money than I thought, up front, which is very frustrating.
Well, that's massive, right? Because people are probably thinking about using that holding fee for other application fees, right? Because I can't put all my eggs in one basket, so that was my money to apply for somewhere else. That's horrifying.
Make sure to ask in those cases, will I get it refunded if I don't end up getting to rent the unit? To because if you don't know, you're going to be handing over some money and you won't. Yeah.
All right, if I'm bucking my eyes, it's because you're literally saying that some of these fees may not be refundable.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
It's possible. It's literally whatever the person who's collecting it, whatever policy that or process that they go by. So you just want to make sure to advocate for yourself as much as possible. It's especially when you're handing over that money, you don't want to make sure exactly like, what conditions do I give this to you and what conditions do I get it back?
Okay, that's horrible. That's horrible. Were there other ones that you came up with, Lori? You're bending over like you're over your computer, so it was like.
Yes, I have. There's basically confusion about the process, confusion about the quote unquote right versus wrong way to do something. I think a lot of people are afraid that if they do something the quote wrong way, that something bad will happen. And I want people to feel confident. But anyway, the confusion about the technical requirements, what's needed of them, and then the confusion about the screening process and their legal rights. So there's so many different areas. I would say the process and the screening and legal issues are the biggest ones that I come across. And a lot of times I just have to say, like, I can't answer that because I'm not a lawyer. You know what I mean? And don't get me wrong, I have nothing but respect for someone who could answer that. But yeah, I just don't feel it wouldn't be appropriate for me to answer those kinds of questions. So that would be a clear Northwest Justice question.
Mm-hmm.
And then as far as screening goes, that's a little bit more. You can find that out on a case by case basis with landlords.
I'm just curious. Does either BHA or KCR have like a little brochure that says like step 1, step 2, step 3? That just kind of simplifies it. Just says, like you were saying, Matt, I'm looking for a place. I'm looking at Zillow, and now I'm moving in, and obviously there's too many details in there, but it's just kind of, all right, and it kind of gives you a little S, and you're going to the next step, Is there anything like that? You are here.
Not, we should make one, but no, I mean, I think because for us, we've been somewhat hesitant because there's so many different branches, right? So it's hard to have a prescription. We're trying to do that for the eviction process now, so that people can understand the different pieces. But I'm open to inputting if there's if someone's that's going to make that. But I agree. I think it would be really nice for tenants to kind of just or not necessarily maybe step by step, just some things to watch out for. It's not comprehensive, but just some things to watch out for or to look for right at each stage. I think that could be really helpful.
Yeah, with just little links, you know,
Mm-hmm.
it's like, all right, you made it here. Now you're gonna go there. Otherwise,
Mm-hmm.
you're gonna go here, and then you might go back up this way. So it's a little bit of everything, all in the all of the above. Um, man, I want to give you the final word. This has been a really good podcast today. Just like last week, a ton of information. We got quite a few people watching us live right now, so that's fantastic. Thank you all for coming. Lori, I'll give you the last word, and then Matt, you finish it up, and then we will. I know we're over a little bit, but I appreciate you both.
Okay, so I was on one more thing is if you are searching for a place right now, this is the perfect time to start calling because it's the end of the month, and now everyone who's moved out for the month of October is officially out. This is a great time. Get on it, please. If you are a Section 8 EHV or HCV voucher holder and you're looking for a place, you need help with things like application fees, um, holding fees, a security deposit. In certain cases, I can help. Just give me a call or actually contact me at landlord@bremertonhousing.org. And I'm going to put my phone number in the private chat as well. And so that's what I've got.
All right, Lori's email there is in the chat, and then I will make her phone number available. Matt.
Yeah. Well, again, thanks, Marwan. Always an honor and privilege to be on the Conduit, and really appreciate the work. And thank you, Lori. Yeah, Lori's been a great partner at Bremerton Housing Authority, doing a lot of really good work, especially with that landlord list she's emailing out. So happy to be here with you. I'll just say for those that are in the thick of housing search, it's really hard, and there's people that are rooting for you. Even though it can be pretty lonely and pretty frustrating getting rejected over and over again. So we're rooting for it. We want everyone to be housed and in Kitsap. And just like Laura was saying, if you're experiencing homelessness, we have if you get qualified for a place, we have move-in costs for you. So just know that if you're in, fleeing domestic violence, in a shelter, in your car, bouncing between different places in your vehicle, that we have moving costs for you. So come on down, and good luck.
I love it. Another great Monday. Can't think of a better way to have Monday. Mondays with housing. I think it's actually a lot. It's good to have it on a Monday instead of on a Friday, right? You're going into the weekend. Obviously, you might look at a lot of places on the weekend, but this gets your week started, right? So hopefully, folks have some energy. They can make some calls tonight, make some calls tomorrow, or do some searching tonight. Make calls in the morning. Set up some appointments. Have that strength. Email Lori. Get on that list. Have her help you out. Contact KCR, Matt, and kind of work it all out, and just know that folks are there with you. We will definitely be back next Monday. I want to thank you, Lori, for coming. Matt, as always, thank you for coming. Looks like you're getting stronger every week. So, I got rid of my cane yesterday. So I'm happy about that. I don't think I ever saw you with your cane. So, you're definitely stronger than I am. You're definitely doing it. So I do want to remind everyone tomorrow, and this is for you two also. Tomorrow we have Holly Balsted from Kitsap Public Health coming on at noon. And then right after that, we have a super important podcast. Dr. Yao and Dante, I can't recall his last name right now. I apologize for that. Is doing a study from the Fred Hutchinson Cancer Center. They are looking for African American males that are willing to be interviewed. They're going to come on and talk about how important prostate cancer is tomorrow at 1 p.m. So if you know of anyone that fits this demographic, they can come on to the podcast tomorrow. If they do come on and they want to participate in the study, there's a $50 stipend for that. G2 is going to match that by 50% and add $25 to that. So prostate cancer awareness is tremendously important. So please tune in tomorrow. Share the word. Again, if you have loved ones or friends that you care about, men's health is something that has been stigmatized. We don't talk about it. We rub dirt on it and keep on pushing. but we've got to stay healthy, right? Our friends, our family, they need us. And so we this is the way that we do it. Physical health, mental health awareness, getting engaged, removing the stigma. So that is it for today. For Lori from the BHA, from Matt from KCR, I am Marwan Cameron. This is the Conduit. We appreciate you so much, and we will see you next time.